All right, Dalton, another position unit today. We got the top 10 linebacker units in college football heading into the 2024 season. So not only we did the top 10 linebackers already individually. Now, what teams have the best group of linebackers in the country? That's what we're going over right now. And we'll start off with my number 10 school, which is the Ohio State Buckeyes. So they lose both their starters in Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, but they have plenty of intriguing options behind them. Cody Simon had a 77.7 PFF grade last year. That was 7th in the Big Ten. Sonny Styles, a really, really talented safety, moving up from safety to linebacker this year. And he's 6'4", 235 pounds. So I think that frame will really hold up there at linebacker. Last year, he was 6th among Power 5 safeties with 7 tackles for loss or no gain. He's a former top 5 recruit in the country as well. He's got a high ceiling too. And then also CJ Hicks is one of their death pieces. He was a top 15 overall recruit in the 2022 class and should factor in a lot more in the 2024 season. So at number 10 is Ohio State. At number 9 is Oklahoma State, where they kind of did the opposite of Penn State, right? Where Abdul Carter goes from linebacker to edge defender. Colin Oliver goes from edge defender to linebacker. Even though he wasn't allowed to really be a pass rusher as much as he was in the past, he still led all linebackers in the country last year with 37 pressures. Also had a 75 coverage grade as well. One of our top 10 linebackers in college football. They also brought back Nicholas Martin, one of their starters last year too. He was 2nd among Big 12 linebackers with 19 pressures last year, only behind his teammate in Colin Oliver. At number 8, I mentioned before, Penn State moving Abdul Carter to edge defender. They actually still have a top 10 linebacker unit, even without Abdul Carter factoring in there. So, they have Kobe King, who was 7th among Power 5 linebackers last year with an 84.6 grade. Dominic DeLuca was tied for 1st with a 90.8 coverage grade among Power 5 linebackers with at least 250 snaps. And then Tony Rojas, former top 100 recruit, as a true freshman last year, he had an 83.5 grade on 122 snaps. So at number 8 is Penn State. At number 7 is Michigan, who lost, obviously, 2 stud linebackers in Junior Colson and Michael Barrett, but they added Jayshon Barham, who we consider to be one of the top 5 linebackers in college football, and Ernest Hausman is back as well. He played over 300 snaps for the Wolverines last year and was 11th among Big Ten linebackers with a 70.6 coverage grade. And at number 6 is Alabama. So they bring back both their starting linebackers in Deontay Lawson and Jahad Campbell. Lawson was 7th among all linebackers in the country with an 88.1 pass rushing grade. Campbell finished 9th in the SEC in yards allowed per coverage snap. And then also Jeremiah Alexander is going to move from edge defender to off-ball linebacker. He was a top 15 recruit in the class of 2022. So at number 10, just recap real quick, is Ohio State. Number 9, Oklahoma State. 8, Penn State. 7, Michigan, and 6, Alabama. What stands out to you, Dalton, in the 10 through 6 range right there?
So first, Max, you've got the Big Ten dominating linebackers just like they did with safeties, right? You've got 3 teams already in the back half of your top 10 and more to come. But the group that sticks out to me, because I think the impact they could have with Carter moving up to edge defender is Penn State, right? I think King and DeLuca is a really, really good pair to have. And I think in part the reason that they feel good about moving Carter to the edge is the fact that they have these 2 guys. And I really like DeLuca, especially in coverage. I think actually with some of the struggles in run defense that Carter did have as a linebacker, their linebacker unit may have gotten better with Abdul Carter leaving it. And now with Kobe King and Dominic DeLuca there. And Michigan's an interesting one because you've got 2 linebackers who were drafted. Colson especially was really, really good for them. And they're going to have some questions about maybe coverage in the middle of their defense, right? They lost Keon Sabb to Alabama. Rod Moore got hurt. And Jayshon Barham last year at Maryland, the one thing that kind of dropped off for him was coverage, especially in the middle of the field. Kind of got a lot more run as a pass rusher and was kind of a liability in coverage. So I think those 2 teams are very interesting in the Big Ten as far as linebackers go.
Yeah. So is there anything, would you move up any of those teams in the top 10 through 6 or maybe move in a team outside of it? Or do you think that's pretty okay right there?
I think I would flip those 2. I really like those 2 guys Penn State has. I do. That 7. If you put Penn State at 7 and Michigan at 8, I think I'd be good with that. Just because we've seen a little bit more of DeLuca and King last year. I know Penn State always rotates a lot of guys in their front 7, but they really produced for them last year. And I actually think they make this team better with both of them playing and Carter moving to the edge.
Yeah, I like that. All right, let's move on to the top 5 then right now. So at number 5 is LSU, who has the best linebacker in college football in Harold Perkins. We did a video on him already, so check out that video if you want to see us break down his game. They also have another returning starter in Greg Penn III, who was 6th among all Power 5 linebackers last year in yards allowed per coverage snap. And then Whit Weeks played a healthy 305 snaps last year. He was 2nd among Power 5 freshman linebackers with a 69.7 run defense grade. So number 5 is LSU. At number 4 is Georgia, who lost Jamin Dumas-Johnson to Kentucky. Still have a loaded linebacker room, though, with Smile Munden, C.J. Allen. C.J. Allen was actually a starter as a true freshman last year, and Munden obviously is a starter as well. They also have 3 former 5-star recruits behind them in sophomore Raylan Wilson and then true freshman Justin Williams and Chris Cole. And then Jalen Walker is expected to move to off-ball linebacker after playing edge defender. He had a 72.6 grade last season. So Georgia, really, really good depth in that linebacker room, even after losing Jamin Dumas-Johnson. But I mentioned Dumas-Johnson going over to Kentucky. They check in here at number 3 for my linebacker units right now. Obviously, Dumas-Johnson we think is a top 10 linebacker in the country. De'Aaron Jackson was an all-SEC member for us at PFF last year. Alex Afari, another returning starter who was 3rd among all linebackers in the conference with 12 coverage stops as well. So you add a top 10 linebacker in the country in Jamin Dumas-Johnson, and then you bring back an all-SEC linebacker in De'Aaron Jackson, and then Alex Afari, kind of a hybrid between a defensive back and a linebacker for Kentucky, but really good player as well. So Kentucky, very, very strong at linebacker at number 3. At number 2 is Iowa, who brought back Jay Higgins, one of our top 5 linebackers in the country. He was actually the most valuable linebacker in the country last year, according to our wins above average metric. Nick Jackson will also is a returning starter alongside Jay Higgins. He was one of only 2 Power 5 linebackers last year with 80-plus grades as both a run defender and as a pass rusher, and the only other one was Edgerrin Cooper, who was one of the top linebackers in the 2024 NFL draft. I believe the first linebacker taken, right, in the NFL draft by the Packers, because I know Peyton Wilson fell a little bit.
Yes, he was, yeah.
Yeah, so Edgerrin Cooper, LB1 in last year's draft, and Nick Jackson was the only other one in the Power 5 with 80-plus grades as a run defender and pass rusher. So really, really good downhill. And those two are incredible and could arguably be 2 top 10 linebackers in the country. So Iowa's at number 2. And then at number 1 is Clemson, who brought back Barrett Carter, who's our number 2 linebacker in the country. Kind of had a down year last year, but was excellent the year before and should still be one of the top linebackers in the country. And then Wade Woodaz is another returning starter for Clemson. He was 3rd in the ACC in passer rating allowed last year. Kobe McLeod is expected to take over another spot that's vacated by Jeremiah Trotter Jr. McLeod had a 75.4 grade on 90 snaps last year. And then finally, 5-star true freshman Sammy Brown is also in Clemson now. So Clemson, really good depth and got star power there as well with Barrett Carter there. So anything that stands out, Dalton, in the 5-1 range right there?
I think there's a very good argument between the top 2 because Clemson definitely has more depth, right? But Iowa's 2 starters, that's the best pair of starters in the country, and they never come off the field. We've talked about Higgins led the nation in snaps played. I think Jackson was somewhere in the top 10 as well. And Jackson's he's a really, really good run defender. He's a guy, I didn't have him in my top 10 for linebackers when we did that list recently, but he was in the top 15. He was really in consideration for me and somewhere in, probably the 8, 9, 10 spots, and he just missed it. But that's definitely the best pair of starters, and the fact that they play so much and everything for Iowa is so heavily weighted towards them would give me consideration to put Iowa at number 1 on this list because those are 2 really, really good players. Plus, you have Barrett Carter kind of coming off a down year than he had in 2022. There's a good depth versus starters argument and like production versus potential and things like that. I think there's a good case for Iowa to be 1.
Yeah, I think there really is too, and I think it really is kind of 1A, 1B for me in this list right now. So I definitely get your argument there. For Iowa being 1, just because you mentioned, I think Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson, I agree with you, is probably the best pair of linebacker starters that we have in college football. I just kind of sided with the depth that Clemson had, because I think if one of those guys goes down for Iowa, they're in trouble. Clemson has some, really intriguing players behind them. Anything else that sticks out in the 5-1 range, Dawn, or in the top 10 overall?
I think you've got a good dynamic between. You've got this weird thing with Georgia and Kentucky, right? With Jamin Dumas-Johnson going to Kentucky, but Georgia's got a bunch of guys that come in after him, and even last year Dumas-Johnson was getting less playing time as the year was going on, as guys like Smile Munden were performing well and that sort of thing. But Kentucky, and even replacing Trevin Wallace, who was really, really good for them, really athletic guy. Though that's a cool dynamic there when you look at those two teams side by side. It'll be interesting at the end of the year to see which one comes out on top.
Yeah, I like Dumas Johnson more than any Georgia linebacker as of right now. They actually have a lot of potential, all the 5 stars they have. But the reason why I sided with Kentucky is because they have Derek Jackson, who's already an all-SEC member last year for us, and then Dumas Johnson as well. I mean, they are loaded at linebacker. Dalton, you want me to give you a couple of honorable mentions and see if you would have put them in the top 10 overall real quick before we leave?
Absolutely. Let's go. Yeah.
Okay, so Utah was right there, man. Utah had Karenni Reed and Lander Barton both coming back. They are very, very talented linebackers. It killed me leaving them out of the top 10. So Utah was one of those schools. Notre Dame with Jack Kaiser, obviously, they just don't really have any other returning starters besides him. But I think he's a really talented player. Oklahoma, Danny Stutzman coming back. Obviously he's a really, really good linebacker, top 5 linebacker in the country for us. And Jared Kanak is another returning starter too, but he only had a 50 grade last year. So those are a few of the other schools, Dawn. Utah, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma that were right outside the top 10 for me. Does any of those schools stand out as like maybe that you would jump Ohio State or Oklahoma State or anyone else in the top 10 to put them in?
Probably not, just because you have the dynamic where something, there's a big part of this list is depth, right? And you're talking about teams like Oklahoma they have Stutzman, but there's not a ton of other guys. I even think about another school I think of with Florida State with DJ Lundy coming back. He's really, really good, but we're kind of not sure. They have to replace Kalen DeLoach and figure out what else they have there. I think even a team on this list is like that. I look at LSU and I go, Perkins is by far their best defensive player, and he's carrying most of the weight here, right? It's always the depth versus star power argument, but those guys, they're stars, but they're not quite enough of stars to like single-handedly get onto a list like this, like a Harold Perkins is, or like you've got somebody like Colin Ovler who's got like a big standout trait. Like as a pass rusher, you can do different things, right? So no, I think it's a solid top 10. I think the biggest part of it for me, we've probably got a very good argument at number 1, but I think those teams do fall just short.
Okay, sounds great. Perfect list you got right there from Dalton Lossman. So another perfect list by me, Max Chadwick, of course. But we got one more top 10 position unit, Dalton, coming out very soon, which is our top 10 secondaries. So be on the lookout for that, and then be on the lookout for a lot more preview content for the 2024 college football season.